Hey Dulles family, wherever you are joining us from, online, in person, welcome. My name is Andrew, and I'm the student pastor of the 45, which is our student group. And I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a little sneak peek, insight into what's been going on in the 45. If you don't know, or maybe if you don't remember, I talked about our values, the 45's values, a few months ago. The first one is that before we lead a student anywhere, we love them where they are. The second one is we don't run with the answers, we walk through the questions. And the third one is we don't let circumstances affect the quality of our relationships. And those are all really focused in on like an individual, like one person. That's our vision for our students. But another thing that I've seen grow, and that myself and the leaders we've seen grow in the 45, has been the relationship building that has been happening between students and other students, and even students and leaders. I think we may have one of the most diverse groups, one of the most unique groups in Northern Virginia, where we have a 6th grader, an 8th grader, and a 10th grader all hanging out together, talking, playing games and stuff like that. You have middle school and high school girls that are joking and giggling about things and interacting with one another. So we've really seen the value of the community in terms of how the relationships have been growing and how they have been forming. And that is just as important as anything else that we do in the 45. We're going to teach, we're going to talk, we're going to learn, we're going to challenge, but also alongside that, something that is extremely important and dear to the hearts of myself and the leaders is relationship building. And so students, parents, if you in this world right now are looking for that, are looking for relationships, are looking for true quality relationships, you're going to be able to find it at the 45. So I encourage you, we meet every single Sunday, 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Locations vary. If you don't get updates, you don't know what's going on, and you're a parent and you want to know, come find me after the service, and I'll get you all linked up to be able to receive those updates. Okay, so really quickly, Easter is coming up pretty soon. And this year we're doing Easter a little bit differently. We're doing an Easter part 1, and that is on the actual weekend, calendar weekend of Easter. But then the following week, we're going to be doing Easter part 2. So we're kind of expanding Easter into a 2-week experience. The second week, we are going to be doing communion together, in person and online. So invite a friend to both of those weeks if you're going to be here, or if you're only here for one of those weeks, bring a friend to one of those weeks. It's going to be amazing. All right, turn your attention and your focus to our next message in our series, Journey. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, fellow allergy sufferers, happy spring. I'm happy everybody's with us today. So when Amy and I got married, it was December 94. That fall, of course, we were engaged, and I lived about 4 hours away. I was getting my graduate degree. And as a kid, I grew up as a kid and a teenager loving football. It was my passion, I would say. And so I was a part of the campus flag football league. I loved it. And that fall, that September, August, September, before our wedding, Amy was like, please be careful. Please don't get hurt. I don't want you to get hurt before our wedding. And I was like, babe, I've played football my whole life, and don't worry about it. It's flag football. And a few games into that season, this hadn't happened to me before, and I'm going to use the word slightly. I slightly pulled my hamstring, and it was such a bummer. I had to sit out of the rest of the game. And I guess the bigger bummer was I had to call Amy and tell her that I was limping. And she was like, Brad, what? We talked about this. And I said, listen, it's not really, I didn't really get hurt. I'll be okay, and I'm planning to still play. And she was like, please, would you just consider not playing football? Our wedding's so close. And I told her, Amy, I'm not going to get hurt. This is just flag football. And 4 Saturdays before our wedding, I was in a game and I broke a finger. Thank God. I remember thanking God, which is funny later, that it was on my right hand, not my wedding hand. And so it swelled up. It was ugly and awful. And I had to call Amy and tell her, I've got a bandage on my hand. I broke a finger, but it's not my wedding hand. And she was like, Brad, it could have been. And she said, would you give up football? Would you give it up? Would you give up football for our wedding? Would you give up football for me? And I said something to the effect of, babe, I don't need to give up football. I love you and I love football and I'm not going to get hurt anymore. And it was as if God had scripted that part of my life into like an SNL sketch or something, because the very next Saturday, 3 weeks before my wedding, I broke my ring finger on my left hand, my actual ring finger. And it was a nasty break. And my finger swelled to twice the size. It was completely purple and black. And I was too afraid to call Amy. So I waited until the next week. I'd planned to come home anyway and got out of the car. And a few minutes after talking, she noticed the bandage was on the wrong hand. She said, you've got the bandage on the wrong hand. It's supposed to be on your right hand. And I said, yeah, well, I need to tell you something. And I was afraid she wouldn't marry me. And to this day, 27 years later, my ring, is the reminder it's supposed to be of no matter what, our love won't quit. But the fat knuckle above it, that is a constant reminder of how close stupidity is. It's always lurking nearby. Why is it so hard for us to give up control? And I don't mean just as some kind of random sacrifice, like you're doing something religiously, like God just expects people to do these fasting kinds of things. But specifically, why is it hard to give up control for something we actually love? Why do we believe we can actually have multiple top priorities? Why do we hate giving up control for something that will make us better? So, a lot of you know, if you've been around here more than a couple months, that my favorite 2 chapters in all of Scripture are Luke 14 and 15. And I've repeated that many times, and you'll hear me talk about those chapters for years to come, I'm sure. And Andrew just spoke 2 weeks ago on Luke 15, and it's this remarkable unveiling where Jesus makes the lens, brings us into full clarity of who he came for, what his agenda is, and it's for the outsider. Anybody who considers themselves an outsider to religion or to faith, that's who I've come for. The person with regrets, or the person with hurts or mistakes, or the unclean, those who the religious people would consider unclean. That's a big part of chapter 14. He came for the outsider, and actually, he tells us, the only real outsider are those who think they're insiders, the arrogant religious people, the self-righteous people. And so in the middle of this beauty that gets your heart racing, I really describe those chapters as infectious. Like, wow, I want to follow this God. I really want to explore this version of Jesus, because I grew up with the angry God, or organized religion, fighting people. But right in the middle of these 2 chapters, the last paragraph or so of Luke 14 is this, what I used to call like an anomaly. It just didn't sound like Jesus. It's like he went off script, and suddenly his words were so unsettling. They used to scare me. Like, I would read over them and hurry up to get to Luke 15. I would just skip over the last paragraph or so and start with Luke 15, the lost sheep, and leaving the 99. And so I want to read this paragraph because it has everything to do with us moving toward the cross. If we're going to actually live in this realm, or this kingdom as Jesus calls it, of love, sacrificial action, putting into action love for others, because he has done that for us. And this is what he's calling us to. No matter what the person's done or where they've been or how awful things have been, he loves and wants us to experience that and be part of that love. And then abruptly we come to this, Luke 14:25. So large crowds are now traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me, meaning actually wanting to follow me, wanting my life, wanting what I am describing that I offer for you, and does not hate his father, their mother, wife, children, brothers, and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot follow me, cannot be my disciple. Now, if you're thinking, hey, for me, this might be super easy. Brad, if you're telling me that Jesus is saying, all I've got to do is disown my mother-in-law or stop investing in the crazy, dysfunctional Thanksgiving family events, I'm in. Sign me up. That's easy. In our culture, we have a lot of dysfunction. I would say probably in every one of our families. We know what it is to have tension or some kind of family division or argument or even political crud between, family members or siblings not speaking to each other. In Jesus' day, this was much more uncommon. It happens, certainly. We have the prodigal son, one chapter later. It happens, but the general thinking of the day was that in all of society and all the money, the food that we value collecting for our families every day, which was a big need all around the world, of course, in that day, of all the agendas and priorities, family came first. Grandparents who often lived in the home with the family, extended family members, really taking care of one another, loving your sibling above everything, your children, of course. And we have that. We would say that. We say that in America. Well, family comes first. But I think it's a little harder for us to get our heads around compared to Jesus' society, where it was more ubiquitous that everyone knew your job just doesn't come in front of what is most important, your family. So Jesus, who is consistently calling us to love, he calls us to love our neighbor, to love one another. If you're part of his family, if you're truly following him, you won't just sit in church and listen and absorb and be encouraged, but you'll actually participate. You'll do the action version of love, of sacrificing your own energy or time or resources to elevate someone else, to encourage someone else. Love God with every part of you, your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your enemy. Jesus, in a portion of his teaching, teaches us to love our enemies. And then suddenly we have this hate language. And what Jesus is doing here, particularly understood in his culture, is a hyperbole technique. It's this intentional exaggeration to help us compare among two high priorities that maybe are competing. And he's essentially saying, would you, if ever, and it really wouldn't happen or in rare instances, but if your family ever somehow competed with my heart for you, the character I'm trying to build in you, my dream of your future, what I want you, how I want you to think about your resources, open-handed, to love and serve others, how I want you to be an influence to others, an encouragement. If my heart to develop that in you is ever interfered with by a family member, would you prioritize me? This question is Jesus' way of saying, am I, and the person that I've designed you to become, the most important thing in your life, even over what you care most about in this world? That's the point of this question. The question is really about self-denial, another theme that Jesus really speaks to. Primary allegiance, surrender. Jesus is getting to the heart of surrender. And he does use this language, which it can also be scary or unsettling at first, to deny yourself or to die to yourself. In fact, the very next verse, after hate, if you don't hate your mother, brother, father, and follow me, you can't actually be my disciple. He then says in verse 27, and whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be a true disciple of mine. Now, we understand the cross because of the story of Jesus, but in ancient Palestine or Judea, the Roman Empire, it was understood by everybody that the worst criminals, those who carried the most guilt, would also carry their own cross to their crucifixion site. And so Jesus is calling us to some kind of death here when he says, if you don't carry your cross and follow me, you can't actually have what I have for you and step into what I've always purposed you to be. This is scary language. It's common. In Matthew 16, Mark 6, Jesus goes on to say, if you try to hold on to your life, if you try to control your life, you'll actually discover that you've lost it. In fact, I've seen, it's so tragic, the conversations I've had with older people who just are empty or sad. I've sat with people with tears in their eyes who talk about how much wealth they earned, how successful they were, and they can't figure out. I've told you this before. It's haunting to me that they're trying to figure out what's missing. I don't feel like I really lived. And this is a person who never let go of control. They always had to be in control. Jesus goes on to say, but if for me you give up your life, you lose your life, you give up control of your life, of your attitude or your responses or how you view your relationships or other people or how you've been treated or your resources, if you'll let go of control truly, to me, you'll actually find real life. You'll move into a life where you're fully alive. Paul gets into this language in Romans 6. Romans 6 says, if you're buried with Christ, then he'll make you fully alive. In Galatians 2 and 5, he says, if you're crucified, those who are crucified with Jesus actually move into life that is a life they never could have dreamt of or understood, in their ability to influence and give hope and walk in hope and see God do in their life what they never, ever imagined, the story that they could be part of. Jesus is teaching us that to be dead to self is to be alive to life. John Ortberg is a pastor and teacher that I've followed for years. I've referred to him. I've built quite a bit of this series off of the influence of something that he did last winter called From Ashes to Beauty. And in that series he did last winter, he calls all followers of Jesus to become part of the fellowship of the withered hand. And he's referring to the story in Luke chapter 6 of the man with the shriveled hand, the birth defect. And if anything in his life was something that he would control, it would be concealing this hand that in his society would mark him, would keep him from getting work. The religious leaders would have considered him unclean because he was born with this condition. And so Jesus goes to the very deepest part of this man's control and asks the man, will you stretch out your hand? Will you expose it? Will you stop trying to control? Will you stop trying to hide it? And will you stretch it out? And only when he stretches out his hand to Jesus does Jesus make it whole. Jesus is calling us to this radically upside down paradigm or idea, this counterintuitive idea of surrendering control to him so we can become who we really want to become outside, truly outside of our anxiety or our habits or what triggers our responses and reactions to people in tough moments. The stress that we feel about finances or marriage. He is calling you to another way of life and experience and relationship if we'll surrender control. Dallas Willard, in his book, Renovation of the Heart, he defines what it means to be dead to self, what Jesus means and what Paul means in this recurring theme. He says, dead to self is the condition where the mere fact that I do not get what I want does not surprise or offend me and has no control over me. And so in that series last winter that I keep referring to, John Ortberg reminded us of the old ancient prayer of surrender. And it may be one of the simplest prayers you've ever heard. In fact, you can memorize it. If you work on this, you'll easily commit this to memory. I can't. He can. I think I'll let him. I can't. He can. I think I'll let him. In our Monday night men's fire pit group this week, we talked about this. And we asked the question, why does it seem so hard to surrender control, to give God everything, every part of our lives? And it was such a great conversation because in this world, it's counter. It's just counter to how we were raised or what we've been taught. The world believes and teaches us that independence is success. Independence is maturity. And then we stumble upon Jesus' words and his teaching that's so much the antithesis of that. It's counter. That if you surrender control of your life to him, then we step into real creativity. Then we have him infuse in us his strength where we're weak. Talk about accomplishing good for others and strong, healthy relationships and laughter. That's when we step into this other dimension of the full life that God's called us to. We had a really good conversation about this, and one of the guys Monday night said, I think it's so hard to truly surrender everything to God because we want to be in control. And it's just so true. We believe the concept that the more control we have, the more success we have, the more freedom we have, the more good in our life. We equate giving up control to, or control of our future, or our resources, or our relationships, or our thinking or perspective of other people. We think giving up control of those things equates to some kind of slavery. But slavery is when someone takes your freedom from you, takes your control away from you. Surrender to someone who can manage me better, who can lead me better than I can lead myself. That isn't slavery. That is freedom to become who we really want to be, to live the life that is ultimately really fulfilling what we crave. I used to, when I knew in my heart, I knew God was asking me, calling me to become a pastor, to lead a faith community, a church community. One problem with that was when I finally said yes to that, I had to say yes to doing this, speaking messages regularly. And oh my gosh, I did not enjoy this at all, like what I'm doing right now. When I finally got over the fear of talking in front of people, I just didn't feel like I could organize my thoughts well. And I was super intimidated at the thought that anything I had to say would mean anything to anyone, that anybody would get any value out of anything I had to say. I really battled that. I battled God with that. And I tried to hold on to control and saying, well, this just can't work, or I can pastor without teaching. Maybe I'll be like a care pastor. And the more I said yes to God, the more I stepped into these opportunities when I was asked to speak, I would stand up nervously, my hands would shake. I just fought the intimidation that, this isn't going to mean anything to anybody. I started realizing this pattern that throughout the month, a couple of people would say, Brad, I felt like you were talking directly to me. Or I felt like what you were saying just was true. The only thing I could explain was that it just seemed true to me. You were helping me understand who God really is. And I'm telling you, it was like there was nothing, I'd never felt more alive. The same is true about sharing my faith. When I realized young in my faith that, this isn't just for me, this good, how God's changing the way I think of others and what he's shaping in me, it's not just for me. He wants me to share who he is with others, my story, some of my faith story with others. That really freaked me out. And I would just say no. I would just close down to it, like, well, that's for other people to do. And then I would read another place in Scripture that his followers are to be light in dark situations, in dark moments, and in people's darkness, that we're to be salt in flavorless context. That our story will be what compels people, opens their eyes to the reality of Jesus. And that was super intimidating to me. And as I finally had the guts or the courage and would see, not necessarily an opportunity, like I had an agenda, but when someone expressed a need or a view of the world or hurt in some way or confusion about God, I would just know, oh, I think this is one of those moments. And as I would share just my story or just how I used to think or how I used to react, but this has been softening in me. It was remarkable to me that friends that I thought would think I was some kind of religious freak or just didn't like what I believed or what I was saying, so many would say, wow, this really feels true. I've never thought of it this way, or I feel like you're describing who God really is to me. And again, every time that happens, it's like I've never felt so alive. In our group discussion Monday night, another answer to why we struggle so much to give God control is that we're afraid of what he'll ask us to do next. If we really surrender everything to God, what will he ask us to do? And it's funny how the conversation went to where I went as a teenager. I grew up in church, and when I would hear giving everything to God, your whole life, your relationships, your job, your dreams, that God would use my job for what he wants to do with it, my resources, everything. I would think, man, if I fully surrender, he's going to call me to some African village somewhere, or, this drab kind of non-exciting life. And it's funny how the men Monday night kind of brought that up, like that's the fear, is he's going to ask me to do something that's just not fun. And Alex Forster and David Whitaker said, they both kind of said a similar thing about this. It's so easy to think that surrendering our lives fully to God means no fun. Praying for 6 hours a day, listening to bad music and watching bad movies and eating bland food and losing our creativity and our passion. But surrender to God, I think it was David Whitaker who said, but surrender to God's control leads us to the exact opposite. Like more creativity and great music. And the list can go on there with these anecdotal examples, but it isn't the idea of wearing boring clothes or moving to some obscure village somewhere to serve God. Surrender to God means things like learning to forgive the person who hurt you so that you can be free from the hurt that limits your mind and your creativity and your joy. Surrender to God fully means things like not talking so much and being so quick to share your opinion, but learning to be a better listener and a better friend. Surrendering fully to God means things like becoming more generous with your resources so that you're actually investing in what God wants to do in other people's lives. Surrendering fully to God means things like giving up such a busy schedule so that you can be more available, more interruptible to the people around you. What is it? What is it that you're holding on to that you haven't surrendered fully to God? What is it that's getting in the way of you walking in full life? Maybe is keeping you held in your anxieties or your fears. What is it about admitting challenge in a marriage or a relationship or a friendship where you need friends around you to speak life to you? What is it that's embarrassing that you just will not reveal because your pride just won't let you? What is it that God is calling you to be more alive in? What part of your life? And I'm just going to lead you again in this simple prayer as we end here. I can't. He can. I think I'll let him. As we journey to the cross and to Resurrection Sunday, I just so encourage you to journey with us by letting go of control, giving God your life. Jesus, I give you my life. I can't anymore, but I'm developing the confidence that you can. I think I'll let you. We're celebrating Easter this year on Easter Sunday and the Sunday after. The second Sunday is when we'll take communion together, share in communion here online and also at Lightridge High School. I love you guys so much. I love being part of this fellowship of the Withered Hand with you.